All right, major breaking news here in New York City. The NYPD now saying they just found the backpack of the assassin in the UnitedHealthcare case. Investigators believe the man is no longer in New York, but new details could finally help them figure out who the suspect is. Still 3 days later, we don't know. Plus, major movement today in the Daniel Penny Good Samaritan case. Jurors could not come to a verdict on the manslaughter charges, so the judge dismissed it. The New York prosecutors pulled an almost unprecedented move, may not even be legal, to try and have a chance of putting Daniel Penny in jail. How the defense could flip the script come Monday. Also tonight, a massive uprising unfolding across Syria for the first time. Huge changes in that country's civil war. Anti-Western terrorists are on the verge of taking a third major city. Bashar al-Assad's forces are nowhere to be found. Russia says they won't join the fight. Russia's a little busy right now. Counterterrorism expert Phil Mudd on Russia's James Bond-like war already happening in Europe and how Donald Trump plays into all of this. Speaking of Donald Trump, 7 p.m. in New York City, 1 a.m. in Paris. In just a couple of hours, President-elect Trump will head out from the Big Apple to France for the reopening of the Notre Dame Cathedral. The invitation to attend shows just how quickly power is shifting from President Biden to Donald Trump. There's a far more important power struggle right now playing out that could totally change the Trump presidency even before it starts. And with that, we welcome you to the Ferris Network on television. And first tonight, the stakes that we're dealing with for Donald Trump really couldn't be higher. The fight right now is over Pete Hegseth as Secretary of Defense. But the implications are far bigger because a Trump win on this changes the dynamics in Washington. We were the first TV show to tell you last night Hegseth single-handedly saved his nomination. 2 days ago, his nomination was in hospice care. Everybody had written him off, including the betting markets. Now he has a fighting chance. Continue the hospice analogy. Now he's in the ICU. Things are stabilized. And both J.D. Vance and Donald Trump have publicly come to Hegseth's defense. So this will all sit in and sink in over the weekend. Here's J.D. Vance today.
Pete Hegseth is going to get his appearing before the Senate Armed Services Committee, not a sham hearing before the American media. We believe that Pete Hegseth is the right guy to lead the Department of Defense. That's why President Trump nominated him. We're not abandoning this nomination.
It's pretty powerful. Vance's comments come just hours after Donald Trump himself reaffirmed his support for Hegseth. Trump wrote on Truth Social, Pete Hegseth is doing very well. His support is strong and deep, much more so than the fake news would have you believe. Pete is a winner, and there is nothing that can be done to change that. So let's be honest. We know this about Donald Trump. The only reason Trump made that post today is because he saw Hegseth fighting for his nomination. And Hegseth was able to flip the script on the media in a way that Donald Trump loved. This was the moment 24 hours ago.
I don't answer to anyone in this group. None of you. Not to that camera at all. I answer to President Trump, who received 76 million votes on behalf and a mandate for change. I answer to the 100 senators who are part of this process and those in the committee. And I answer to my Lord and Savior.
That soundbite saved Hegseth for now. And listen, and this is what's important. There's a binary outcome here. And put aside whether Pete Hegseth is the Secretary of Defense. This is way bigger what's happening. Either Hegseth gets confirmed or he does not. If Hegseth gets confirmed, it is a body blow to the left. More importantly, to the media. The New York Times, NBC News, CBS, The Washington Post are throwing everything they can at Hegseth. And oddly enough, that includes some members of the conservative media, even MAGA media like Newsmax's Greg Kelly.
Pete Hegseth is no Matt Gaetz. He hasn't done nearly enough for MAGA to warrant the Department of Defense job. And he's got serious baggage. Pete first made his name at Fox News, promoting the Iraq war. He calls himself a recovering neocon. He is blackmailed by a woman who falsely accuses him, but he pays money to her anyway. But if MAGA is you support this nominee or else, You know what? I don't think that sounds like MAGA. I think Make America Great Again is not like China, where everybody has to have the same point of view, get in line or else. No, that's not MAGA.
Greg Kelly may just be jealous of Pete Hegseth. That's one explanation. There's something else going on here. But if Trump and Vance support doesn't get Hegseth over the finish line, it will fill the water around Washington with proverbial blood. And that will bring the sharks in for other cabinet nominees. Tulsi Gabbard, Robert F. Kennedy, Kash Patel, Kristi Noem, they would all be next for that fire. Right now, Hegseth is taking all the fire, and he's fighting back. Here's the other side here, and this is important, because if Hegseth survives, Trump's cabinet becomes bulletproof. The media will have come at a severely flawed nominee with everything they had and walked away with their tails tucked between their legs. Most importantly, it strengthens Donald Trump's hand as he enters the presidency. As we told you, the stakes right now are not about Pete Hegseth. They're about Donald Trump, and they could not be higher. We begin tonight with George Will, Pulitzer Prize-winning columnist for the Washington Post, NewsNation senior political contributor. Good to see you, sir. Are we seeing Donald Trump stronger and, dare I say, more nimble than he was as the president-elect in 2016?
Probably, but Leland, Mr. Hegseth's problem is not the Washington Post or the New York Times or all the rest. His problem is, as he goes up and down the halls of the Senate office buildings trying to see senators and round up support, the media is full of stories coming not from the media, but through the media from the Trump transition, talking about possible replacements for Hegseth, particularly Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida. That is an extraordinarily awkward position for the nominee to be in, where they're already looking at a potential backup and leaking about it. So it seems to me that order ought to be imposed upon, from the top down, the Trump transition, if they're going to get this man across the finish line.
Well, to be fair, those leaks about Ron DeSantis, at least from my sources, have dried up. Right? You know, that was a couple of days ago, and the betting markets had a sort of a massive change, right? Massive recovery in the betting odds. November 20th, he had a 74% chance of being confirmed. Wednesday, that number went to 17%. Today, he's back up at 37%. And there's now a concerted effort by, you want to call it MAGA, but by Donald Trump's supporters to put pressure on the senators. Take a listen.
With all due respect to the senator from Iowa, you're not where the American people are. President Trump is. And Pete Hegseth is.
And if you are going to oppose Pete Hegseth, then we want to know your names and your states, because we'll be visiting a neighborhood near you. We don't get a mandate like this from the American people just to have it forwarded by a bunch of dorks that we never heard of from the U.S. Senate.
You got to put the fear in them. You got to put the fear in. These are not your colleagues. You go up to Capitol Hill, you're in enemy territory. But we can't back off. You can't back off Pete Hegseth. You back off Pete Hegseth, they're going to smell blood. They're coming for Kash, and they're going to come for Tulsi, and they're going to come for Bobby Kennedy. They're coming for all of them.
I think that may be the first time in my life that Steve Bannon and I have oddly had the same talking points, or at least the same view of the world. But there seems to be this understanding by Team Trump that, you know, Matt Gaetz's confirmation or life as a nominee was measured in days, and that showed weakness. Now they need to show strength.
I think you're right that that's their calculation, but I don't think the way to show strength is to attack, as some of the sound bites you just had are doing, senators as stubborn as not doing their duty, which is to stand up and salute the president. Remember, he can only lose 4 Republican senators, Susan Collins, Lisa Murkowski, and a couple others, and that's it. So I really don't think that this is wise for his supporters to make this a question of institutional falling in line. Senators really don't like to be told their duty by talk radio and talk television.
Yeah, it would not be the first time that Charlie Kirk or Steve Bannon have not done their savior, Donald Trump, any favors. I'm I'm fascinated how Donald Trump seems to have flipped, because we very rarely see Donald Trump expend political capital on anybody but himself unless he believes that there's something in it for him. Here he is coming up on Meet the Press this Sunday. They just put this clip out. Take a listen.
It looks like Peter's doing well now. I mean, people were a little bit concerned. He's a young guy with a tremendous track record, actually. He went to Princeton and went to Harvard. He was a good student at both, but he loves the military, and I think people are starting to see it. So we'll be working on his nomination along with a lot of others.
Since you bring him up, do you still have confidence in Pete Hegseth?
Yes, I do.
There seems to be a change from how the media covered Donald Trump in 2016 for some. But for others, there's this old playbook, right, of just attacking first Matt Gaetz, then Pete Hegseth. Next comes either Tulsi Gabbard or RFK Jr. And Trump seems to realize that there is a way to flip that script.
Well, we'll see if he can flip it. But let's remember, Mr. Hegseth has a problem with the numerous allegations of excessive alcohol consumption and his treatment of women. But aside from that, leave all of that aside, Leland. The question is, should a 44-year-old with no significant administrative experience be put in charge of 3.4 million employees of the Defense Department in the most complex building culture in the world, in the Pentagon? That's the real question. Remember, the Secretary of Defense is in the nuclear chain of command in a crisis. Who do you want there? This is a serious business.
Yep.
Far more serious than defending or opposing the Senate on this or that, or husbanding the president's capital. These have real consequences, sometimes at 3 a.m. in a moment of crisis.
No, that's sort of what these senators are wrestling with. Joni Ernst, one of the senators who seems to be on the fence, says she's meeting with Pete Hegseth again next week. So this continues. Although meantime, Tulsi Gabbard, RFK Jr., Kash Patel are not in the crosshairs because the focus continues on Hegseth. So taking one for the team, perhaps. Joe Biden's team is starting to leak this idea of preemptive pardons. Jim Biden, the president's brother, Adam Schiff, Liz Cheney, Anthony Fauci, Mark Milley. You've often pointed out how the presidency has changed, going back, you want to call it George W. Bush or certainly Barack Obama, that every president continues to take more and more liberty, shall we say, than what the founding fathers envisioned. If all of a sudden we have preemptive pardons from Joe Biden, does that lead then to every president, when they leave office, just pardoning, their whole administration, anybody who they like? It feels as though that this is now a completely different, not even chapter, but book in American history.
Pardon whom for what, Leland? What is Liz Cheney to be pardoned for? What is the accusation, the criminal accusation? Mr. Fauci has said things before Congress that seems to me under oath were not true. Does the president really want to get into that business now? Can we not simply ask occasionally, Leland, how far do we want to go down the road to resembling a banana republic in dealing out criminal accusations and defenses against those accusations preemptively as a matter of routine of one party against another? Surely it's time to call a halt to this.
Yeah. We said earlier this week that we were starting to resemble Italy, and not in a good way, from both sides. Both the pardons from Joe Biden and then also some of the things we've seen out of President-elect Trump. Mr. Will, it's always good to see you. Enjoy the weekend, sir. We'll be talking on Monday.
Look forward to it.
Yes, sir. The UnitedHealthcare assassin slipped New York's massive dragnet. He left behind some key clues. What is in that backpack? And might we finally understand who this man is? How he got away? The very unusual route when we come back. Breaking news tonight, you see live pictures of New York Central Park, where police believe they found the backpack worn by the assassin who gunned down the UnitedHealthcare CEO. That vital piece of evidence was found by the merry-go-round in Central Park. He ran into the park after the shooting. He also may have left New York City almost immediately after the shooting. Here's the video that we all remember from Wednesday morning. Chief of Detectives Joseph Kenney on CNN today.
We have him in a taxi cab, and the taxi cab takes him up to 178th Street and Broadway, which, as we know, is a Port Authority bus center. Those buses are interstate buses. That's why we believe he may have left New York City. We have video of him entering the Port Authority bus terminal. We don't have any video of him exiting.
All right, so 3 days now since the shooting, and still, to our knowledge, the police don't have a name. They don't know which bus he took, and they're still working to find out an actual or real motive. There have been some that we have thought we knew. Former FBI Special Agent, Chief Security Officer of Nardello, Tim Gallagher, is with us. Tim, also former Special Agent in charge New York and Newark field offices. Former Cigna Health Insurance exec, author of Deadly Spin, an insurance company's insider speaks out on how corporate PR is killing healthcare and deceiving Americans. Wendell Potter here as well. Gentlemen, thank you. Tim, start with you. How crucial is this backpack?
Well, once again, thanks for having me on. This backpack, could be a treasure trove of evidence, which will help lead us to who this individual is, and hopefully, lead us to taking him into custody, lead law enforcement to take him into custody. We have, DNA potentially on the backpack, whether it be hair or skin from the suspect. Potentially ammunition that could be, unused ammunition could be in the bag as well, that could be utilized to trace lot numbers. And the backpack itself could be traceable. It may have some imperfections in it, which make it readily identifiable and hopefully lead law enforcement to his doorstep.
One thing I thought was interesting is this idea that he goes from Central Park to 178th Street and Broadway, Port Authority Bus Center. That is not the main Port Authority bus center that people typically use commuting in and out of New York City. For somebody who seemingly had this plan, right, go to Central Park, trying to sort of break up his trail, then Port Authority bus center, but not the one that everybody normally uses. This suspect had a plan. You've investigated these kind of cases before. How much more difficult does it make it that he has this head start that he knew he was going to have to prepare for?
Yeah, the trail does grow somewhat cold. Obviously, he left plenty of evidence behind, which is going to close the gap on that trail. But quite a circuitous route that he took. What does that tell you? It's obviously it's evidence of guilt, in that he thought that he may have been being followed. We refer to in the business as surveillance detection route. Try and get an idea of if was anyone on him at that point. But, you got to know what you're doing to be going to that bus terminal, not the one that the rest of New York City goes through to get out of the city.
Man, makes a lot of sense. There's obviously the manhunt, which we'll come back to you on with, but this whole other debate that is now opened up, the bullets that killed this healthcare CEO had those messages written on them, deny, defend, depose, referencing to denial rates by insurance companies, UnitedHealthcare having one of the highest, if not the highest, of major insurance companies. And then it has sort of built this reaction, and we got to be careful here, that the emotion that this has brought out in the general public of a conversation not about how awful the killing is, which it is, but a conversation about how healthcare companies do business and almost justifying the anger people have. Take a listen.
Of course, vigilante justice is not the answer to the problem, but what I should say is, and this incident and the reaction to it ought to be a wake-up call to this industry.
This company hurt a lot of doctors, couldn't get their money. There are a lot of patients that had to wait a long, long time to get their bills paid.
And so we've gotten to a point where healthcare is so inaccessible and unaffordable, people are justified in their frustrations.
You shouldn't go broke trying to live.
Wendell, what do you make of this?
What I make of this is that this has just triggered and brought to the surface rage that has been building for years now, and people have just not known how or when to express it. People hate health insurance companies. I used to work for them. I worked for them for 20 years. Consistently, this industry has been at the very bottom of public support and public favor. And people are seething with anger. And they're not obviously showing any sympathy or compassion for this executive. It's a sad situation. You know, I feel compassion for the family. It's a tragic thing. But people are themselves feeling victimized, and in fact feeling that they have been violated by these big companies for a long time. We pay a lot of money in our premiums every year. They keep going up every year, but also these companies settle us for.
You think they're going to change, Wendell? You know them. Is there going to be some sort of soul searching by healthcare executives who say, "Oh my God, we've done this wrong," or are they going to say, "Hey, a couple $1 million for corporate security. We're going to take all the names of our executives off the website. Maybe we'll, fly them around in private jets more, and then we'll keep on making our billions."
It'll be more the latter, because they're hamstrung. Their allegiance is to Wall Street. It's notable that he was in New York to make a presentation at United's Investor Day. I used to plan those, or help plan those for Cigna. That's where the stakeholders of importance for these companies gather. We're talking about the big institutional investors and the Wall Street financial analysts. They are the ones that these companies care most about. And to satisfy them, you have to behave like they've been doing. You have to deny access to care and deny claims. So they're in a hard spot. They are all major stockholders companies, and
it's interesting. Just one of the big insurance companies just now moved their investor day to be virtual. They don't even want their executives in front of investors, which is sort of remarkable how now this is going. Tim, I want to give you the last 30 seconds. What are you looking for in the next 48 hours over the weekend?
Yeah, I think we'll definitely see a name come out of this individual. The pictures are so good. We have he left town on a bus. We're going to get evidence out of that backpack. You'll see a name. You'll see wanted posters. You'll see law enforcement nationwide mobilizing thousands of officers looking for this one individual, and I think you will see him brought to justice.
All right, and then the trial, which if this is somebody who is angry, as Wendell points out how angry people are, that would be a fascinating moment, really, to see. Tim, Wendell, thank you, gentlemen, appreciate it. Tucker Carlson showed up in Moscow to ask the Russians if a war with America is inevitable. Let me just tell you, Carlson asked the wrong question. What the Kremlin is doing right now and when it's coming to America. There's a real chance that the Syrian president will leave his country. His family's already bolted. That decade-long civil war with the rebels, well, they might win. Now, they're terrorist nuts, but it's amazing what is happening right now in Syria, because it's going to be a body blow to Russia and Vladimir Putin if Assad falls. Putin is not going down without a fight, at least not worldwide. There is a James Bond-like movie playing out across Europe, except Bond in this case is not the good guy. Putin and his spies are conducting a secret war against the West, have been for more than a year now. The Telegraph from the UK reports, taken together, the conclusion becomes unavoidable that over the last 12 months, as the West has continued to support Ukraine's war efforts, Russia has dramatically escalated its attacks of sabotage across Europe and beyond, so in a greater sense of instability on the continent than any time since the Cold War. So we have this mapped out here. You can see every red dot is an act of sabotage. You could call it an act of war by the Russians. So Poland right here, big center and staging ground for weapons going into Ukraine. Massive fire at a shopping mall in Poland. The Polish prime minister said Russia was behind it. That incident happened amid a few other fires across Poland over a couple of days. These things don't happen by accident. This is part of a coordinated campaign by Russia. Go back to the map. Another key logistics point for everything involving the United States and NATO, Lithuania. What happened there? Crash of a DHL cargo plane a couple of weeks ago. Germany's foreign minister said the crash could be what they call a hybrid attack, because Germany, along with a number of other countries, are looking into, we'll see the crash happen right here, that Russian agents have been trying to put bombs inside DHL cargo to blow up planes as they headed to the United States. Then there is what happened at London's Gatwick Airport. It was targeted in late November. There was a suspicious item found in luggage. You can see people were pushed outside. They have their blankets on. The entire airport was evacuated. There's also been espionage, sabotage, and an assassination attempt linked to Russia across Europe. Philip Mudd is with us, former counterterrorism official in the CIA and FBI. Philip, I guess the biggest question to start with, right, is are the Russians doing in America what they're already doing in Europe?
I wouldn't count that out, especially if you're at the FBI and it's the FBI's responsibility to follow the Russians here. One of the surprises I was thinking about when you were speaking was going back, if you think this is a new phenomenon, it's not, was going back nearly 20 years. The murder of Litvinenko, who was an oppositionist, a former intelligence officer, an oppositionist in the UK, in England. He was murdered by KGB agents using plutonium. This is, if I remember right, 2006. So if it's going to happen in the UK 18 years ago by the same regime, sitting there in Washington saying it can never happen here, I wouldn't count on that at all.
Yeah, and look, Vladimir Putin is in a really pickle right now because you've got Syria that he had put so much effort into falling, Iran that he invested so much into now getting squeezed and backing down with Donald Trump coming in. Mexico just announced the largest seizure of fentanyl in history. You weren't trained, nor I, to believe in coincidences. How much of this world changing that we're seeing has to do with the fact that Donald Trump takes office now in 6 weeks?
I'm not sure that I would tie it to Donald Trump at all. And I'm not sure I would agree with your assessment. If I'm looking at the world, my job when I was at the CIA was to look at the world through the opposition's eyes, through the eyes of the adversary. The primary rule there is not to mirror image. That is not to think that the adversary thinks like you do. If I'm an American sitting in the seat that you're sitting in, I'd say life is rough for Putin. If I'm in Putin's seat, I'm saying, look, I moved into Ukraine, and it looks like I might have an American government coming in that says that we can negotiate that. I've got North Korean troops there. There's an alliance. I got the Americans getting a little bit sideways over the course of decades with the Chinese. That's to the Russians' advantage. I've got alliances with important players who can ship oil. That's the Iranians. So I think if I'm looking at the incidents you talked about, Leland, and looking at through the eyes of the adversary, I might say, why wouldn't I continue doing this? Maybe it works.
Well, look, there was the TV show The Americans, one of my favorite shows about the Russian illegals in the United States. There's no reason, right, if you're Putin, to not do this in the United States?
Well, I would take it a step further. If you're in the intelligence business, going back to the Cold War years, you used to run agents out of embassies. Classic operation, have somebody who's under what you call undercover in embassy, somebody who's a cultural officer, who's actually a CIA guy who worked with people like me. If you go into the 21st century, one of the most interesting things I saw at the FBI when I transitioned to the FBI from the CIA was what's called out-of-embassy operations. That is, if you want to steal from Silicon Valley, if you want to steal from a university doing defense research, why would you operate out of Washington? You'd be a student. You'd be a professor. You'd be an investor. You'd be a businessman. So these kinds of operations you saw in the Americans are 21st century espionage, not stuff out of embassies, Leland.
Where does this go for Vladimir Putin? You thought we see what's happening in Syria. I think that is meaningful. You see the Iranians changing. You see the plates moving. What is the old saying about a crisis is both danger and opportunity?
Yes.
And a change of a U.S. administration. Is that danger or opportunity for Vladimir Putin?
Opportunity. I go back again mentioning Ukraine. If you had said a few years ago that Vladimir Putin would lose so many soldiers and still be sitting there saying, I might win this because the Americans will negotiate me out. In other words, will give me a chance to keep some Ukrainian territory. You'd say, you got to be kidding me. You mean the Americans are going to accept Russia redrawing lines in Europe? That's an opportunity for Iran. North Korean troops, opportunity. America sort of confronting China, opportunity. So I look at this, if I'm Vladimir Putin, saying, I want to reestablish the empire. The Americans have dissed us since the fall of the Berlin Wall. Keep rolling. It's going to work. What
do you make of motive here? We know that Vladimir Putin has the opportunity, but there's motive, and it seems as though he's not that afraid of getting caught, right? You've got now the UK Telegraph writing articles about this. There's not a huge attempt to cover their tracks. If anything, almost to say, hey, we can do this with impunity.
Why would you be afraid of getting caught? I mean, I mentioned Litvinenko murdered in London nearly 20 years ago. If you've got an American government coming in saying, we think we can negotiate out of Ukraine, which means that's an opportunity for Putin. If you've got the Europeans, I'm sure, saying, heck, if the Americans are going to negotiate out of Ukraine, we're not going to keep going either. If you look at Putin, you've got to be saying, what's the cost to me reorganizing or sort of re-energizing the empire? The motive is pretty clear. The Berlin Wall falls and Russia becomes a third world country. We've got to reestablish it with a KGB officer that is Vladimir Putin at the head of it. To me, it's pretty simple. It's vengeance against the West and reconstruction of the East. Not very complicated.
Well, not very complicated to many. We have you here to make complicated things quite simple, which is the hard part. Have a great weekend, Phil. Thank you.
Thanks. Take care.
A New York jury has refused to convict Good Samaritan Daniel Penny. Live pictures of the courthouse there. The unheard of move prosecutors are using and will try on Monday to get a conviction. To deliberate. Today, the jury told the judge they were hopelessly deadlocked on the manslaughter charge. Prosecutors wanted to send Penny to jail, Daniel Penny, for 15 years for protecting riders on a New York subway. Penny restrained Jordan Neely after the schizophrenic homeless man threatened riders. Neely died shortly after police arrived on the scene, but Penny isn't free tonight. He still faces a charge of criminally negligent homicide. The judge sent the jurors home for the weekend and will reconvene Monday morning to think about the second charge. With us now, New York criminal defense lawyer Michael DeSharo. Michael, it's good to see you. And I'm confused about this. In every trial I've ever covered, when it's a hung jury, it's a hung jury. You don't dismiss one charge and then the jury comes back for the second, or am I just not a lawyer?
No, you're absolutely right. And I have to give credit to my friend Larry DiGiansanti on this. This is outrageous. This should have been a hung jury. What this judge did is he changed the rules of the game in the middle of the game. They had a charge conference. They agreed to the charges. Now let's go and see what the jury thinks about these charges. Oh, the jury doesn't agree, or the jury can't agree. Let's give them some new charges. I cannot believe that Judge Wiley did this. I've never seen this, and I don't think you're ever going to see this again. The parameters were set. Now the jurors are faced with a new playing field. Now let's put the facts to this charge and see how that is. That is not how it's supposed to work. There's several issues on appeal here if there's a conviction, but I doubt there's going to be a conviction based on what's going on. And I also don't know if the judge told the jury that the DA's office dismissed the charge, or he just said simply, just think about this charge now and let us know about that.
It's sort of stunning. And look, one of the reasons we keep having you back, in addition to you being a great guy, is that you call these things perfectly. You did with all the charges about Donald Trump. Last week or 2 weeks ago, you were saying that Daniel Penny was going to be a hung jury. You've nailed this. Jury deliberation time, Monday closing arguments, Tuesday begin deliberation, jury requested reading of instructions. Wednesday, jurors reviewed footage again, requested reading of a cross-examination. Thursday, jurors requested definitions of reckless and negligent. Friday, jurors say no unanimous decision. Judge accepts the motion to dismiss the first charge from the prosecution. Juries, very difficult to read, but you're an expert in this. You've seen it a lot. What are you seeing here?
I'm seeing that there are camps. Every jury breaks down into little fiefdoms, and sometimes it's 3 fiefdoms, sometimes it's 2, sometimes it's 6 verse 6, sometimes it's 11 verse 1. I think there's a camp of people who are not satisfied and don't want to plead guilty, and they're trying to be appeased. And this is the last desperate attempt from the DA, because, mind you, this case will never be tried again if there's a hung jury.
Why not?
Because I don't think there may not be enough time, and Alvin Bragg is facing re-election, and this case is politically fraught. So this is the chance that they have. And this desperate move really shows the kind of situation that the prosecution put the jury in. The jury may make them pay because now they have to deal with a whole new set of legal theories that they have to consider. I just don't think 12 people from who I've spoken to every class of New Yorker I can find, not just attorneys. I've spoken to my doorman, to everybody I can find, and there's a strong tendency to find him not guilty.
Yeah, I think your point in terms of what the person who is holding out, right? So if they were deadlocked on the manslaughter charge, that means at least one juror wanted to find him guilty of manslaughter, right?
Correct. We don't know the number, though. Could have been 6-6, could have been 11-1.
Right. So that means that there's going to be that same camp who's definitely going to want to find him guilty of this new charge.
Yes, because I think if they could have compromised on that charge, I think they would have. If they would have said, fine, let's just go not guilty with the manslaughter because we can't agree. We'll just go and let's compromise on this verdict, which is called the compromise verdict. I think they would have done that. Now it's a new battle on what negligence means according to what the judge told them. But this all comes down to reasonableness, and the subway is a witness. And these are people that take the subway, and they're taking those experiences into the courtroom. That's why I think it's going to be a hung jury.
You've called this all along. We'll all wait for Monday. Michael, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
All right. 2 months later, FEMA has finally apologized for totally screwing up the response to Hurricane Helene. Frigid night in Asheville, North Carolina, why President Biden says he will not step in with waivers that save families from sleeping in the snow that is in that picture tonight. Mountains of North Carolina right now. Live pictures, Asheville, North Carolina. The wind chill is in the teens. And hundreds, if not thousands, of families are still homeless 2 months after Hurricane Helene. More than 500 families qualify for FEMA's temporary housing. FEMA promised 103 temporary homes to be delivered last week. As of Wednesday, only 46, less than half. 2 months after the hurricane. Vice President-elect J.D. Vance was there today, shining a rightful light on, I don't know how else you say it, but a shameful response of the Biden administration.
Think about it. The argument here is that you can't allow people to put mobile homes in a floodplain in an area that has the risk of flood damage. Well, that's pretty much this entire area, an area of the state of Massachusetts. If you don't grant a waiver, you're effectively telling people they've got to move hundreds of miles away and do it 2 weeks before Christmas. It's ridiculous, it's atrocious, and we need a government that responds quickly to the needs of its citizens.
The government has not responded, but Samaritan's Purse has. Edward Graham, Billy Graham's grandson, now the CEO, Chief Operating Officer of Samaritan's Purse, is here and has been on the ground, son of Reverend Franklin Graham. Edward, it's good to see you. Thank you. How is it that Samaritan's Purse is able to do so much and the government seems to be able to do so little?
Well, I appreciate it. It's a great question. I think the reason we can respond quickly is that Samaritan's Purse always works through the local church. We always have the supplies and resources on hand, and we have those in our warehouses. We have the trucks and equipment, and then we go out. All we do is we call and ask for volunteers to show up, and we'll work and live through the local churches. The churches know where the needs are and point us in the right direction. We have what we call work orders come in. Those are homes that need to be mucked out and the drywall cut out, dried out. That's where the trees get cut back. We put tarps on roofs, but the church knows all that information. They help us respond quickly. And God also trusts us what I call his widow's mite, the $20 gifts a month. That's what Samaritan's Purse operates on because that's all she can give. And she expects us to go not just to do good work, but to share the gospel of Jesus Christ.
I get all that. What is confounding to me, and I've been in enough natural disasters in my old job, where Samaritan's Purse was there before FEMA in a lot of cases. And that may be fine in the first 24, 48, 72 hours. But this idea, and I'm wondering what you're seeing on the ground, that FEMA has approved all these families for trailers and they're not getting delivered. How do we square that circle?
You know, the vice president, well, the soon-to-be vice president, Senator Vance, he articulated it very well. He was with a family at one of our SP sites, at Samaritan's Purse, what you just saw right there. He was standing at that site, and a mobile home from the homeowner had hit the other homeowner's house. The father's house hit the son's house. And so he was talking to him about his mobile home. He saw the need and the challenges of getting these homes in there quickly. We have committed to building over 1,000 homes, stick-built and mobile homes, and giving them and putting in. So some of these restrictions, what he's talking about, these land restrictions, we need a waiver in order to put these homes back in on the land that they belong on. This was the 100-year floodplain. Well, that just got shot. We've never had a flood like this before. Shattered all kinds of records. It set the new record, the new bar. So the soon-to-be vice president, he hit it right on the head. And I think you're going to see some changes coming quickly.
Well, conceivably the new administration would. We've been told over and over again that so much of the complaints and so much of what we see on social media about people still living in tents and not being able to get help is quote unquote disinformation, whatever you want to call it. You all have been on the ground there. I'll just ask you, are there people who are in need of help who are not getting it?
Oh, yes. So there's still people that need help. I was flying over it today, and you still see some of our Samaritan's Purse blue tarp on these roofs. Basically, they're using them as tents and shelters. There's still a lot of people without power. When I was flying down this morning, I was up in New York for an event, and when I was flying back in, it was 3 degrees right here in my hometown. My kids missed school again this week because of snow. It's cold here in the mountains, and there's still people living in tents. We're working quickly to get, like I said, permanent shelters in. But the role of FEMA is to help them with also the temporary shelters, and there's a big gap there.
It does seem like there's a big gap. Chances before Christmas that everybody's out of tents?
No, I don't see that happen. We're working quickly. There's better experts when it comes on the FEMA side. I'm not an expert on FEMA. But what I do know is that Samaritan's Purse is going to stay there. We're not leaving. This is home for us anyways. But I had just left Mayfield, Kentucky, where we finished our last home there. And we dedicated it. 82 homes we built in that community. And When I left, I landed in Boone. It was raining. That was Hurricane Helene. It didn't stop for 3 days. We're not going anywhere.
Well, a lot of folks say they're not going anywhere. I've been in enough disaster sites to know that's true of Samaritan's Purse. Appreciate you joining us, sir. Thank you.
No, appreciate you keeping this in the news. Thank you very much.
No, it's important. We will keep it in the news and keep talking about North Carolina. Enjoy the weekend. Here's Chris.